stop. Don't lay another piece of track on your layout until you have a RailFlow track alignment guide from Oak Hill Model Railroad Track Supply. Whether you're forming curves, testing layout fit, or hand-laying rail, the RailFlow Track Guide ensures accuracy and simplicity. Now available in N, HO, and HON3, RailFlow Track Guides eliminate misalignments and wobbly track lays in both straight and curved track. Order your RailFlow Track Alignment Guide today at ohrtracksupply.com. Spring Creek Model Trains is hitting the road and taking scale signs along for the ride. The signs that bring your models to life can now be found in Deschler, Nebraska, and at nearly 100 train shows throughout the country. Hello, Colorado! Get your scale signs from Spring Creek Model Trains at the Model Train Expo at the Boulder County Fairgrounds in Longmont, December 12th through the 14th. And to see more of the largest collection of handcrafted scale signs on the planet, head to scalesigns.com. The railroad that inspired a generation can now be a part of your collection. Home Shops is proud to offer Rapido General Electric C36-7 locomotives featuring the legendary paint scheme of Tony Custer's Allegheny Midland. Home Shops has combined the amazing quality of Rapido trains with the storied freelance railroad you grew up with. This limited edition run features 2 road numbers and is available in DCC Sound or DC Silent while supplies last. Bring the Allegheny Midland home to your layout. Order today at homeshops.net. ATLP Extra is our monthly newsletter delivered right to your inbox each month. Sign up for free at atlpextra.com.
ATLP Rewind.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott, so glad you could join us. It's time to talk ops with Don Irace, and the title of the show just wouldn't work without the man himself, Don Irace. Welcome, Don.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'm glad to be back. I'm looking forward to this once-a-month podcast. It's been fun.
Yeah, it's been an absolute blast talking ops with you, and speaking of ops and trains and stuff, you know, I'm pretty fascinated with the relationship with you and your dad and sharing trains. And now he's down there in Florida with you, and I get to see updates with him running the railroad. That's been really cool to see.
Yeah, it's been fun. We've been out there pretty much every day, except for a few little yard work jobs. But he's plugging along. Like today he was out there getting ready for an op session tomorrow night. And he's doing all the train moving around, and I'm doing work at the bench. So. But he's having a good time, and I just say, Dad, what do you want to do today? Oh, let's go out to the shed. So there we go. We're out there.
Nice. So he's down there enjoying the little bit warmer weather out of New England and spending time with you, which is just really cool. Really loved seeing your updates, and folks that don't see them should be following your Providence and Worcester page. We got to share a link for that along with everything else, so folks can check that out. And it's just really cool. Really glad that you're able to spend time with your dad. But we got a guest here tonight, and it's kind of funny how things work themselves out. Today's we're recording on Election Day, November 5th. You know, the last time I talked to this guy was actually November 7th, 2022. Oh. And it was completely by accident that it must be just the time of year to talk to Sammy Carlile from Tulsa, Oklahoma, who's joining us. Sammy, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks again for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Welcome. Yeah. Timing's everything. So glad to have you back here again in early November for to kind of catch up with you.
We almost stretched it out a whole year, huh?
We almost 2 years. It's been since November 2022. So 2 years.
Wow, time flies.
Which to me is too long for us to have not talked. So glad to have you back here on the show. I haven't had you on the podcast in 2 years, but it certainly hasn't been 2 years since I've seen stuff from you. You're posting all the time. You've got a group where you and your son are sharing rail photography. You're sharing operating sessions on those pages. So I'm keeping up with you, but great to have you back on here. And then follow up from that conversation from 2 years ago where we chatted about practically everything else but ops. We were talking about old school photography. We were talking about, your influence, why you're Santa Fe all the way, and all the things, and your early childhood influences and everything else. So we covered all the gamut except for operations. So 2 years put off. We're now going to be able to talk about that tonight.
Oh, we could take a deep dive into that. Yeah, I'd be glad to.
Yeah, well, looking forward to doing all that. So, but for those that may have missed that show that actually aired in December of 2022, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your layout and kind of what it does?
Sure, of course. I model the Santa Fe. I model the Hereford Subdivision between Amarillo, Texas, and Clovis, New Mexico. I'm pretty stringent on the place and the time. I kind of hover around the summer of 1995. That's the area that I portray, and the time and place. 95, I picked that because I had taken a lot of rail fanning trips and did a lot of photography along the Santa Fe main line. Around about that time, I started in 93, and I had visited that area in 95, right before the merger. And fortunately, due to one of my wife's best friends living in Albuquerque, she was stationed at the Air Force Base out there. My wife wanted to go visit her at least a couple of times a year. And of course, yeah, who am I to say no to that? I got to do a lot of train watching along the Santa Fe along that time. So basically, between about 94 and 99, I did a lot of trips back and forth over that area. And I started off modeling the Clovis subdivision between Clovis and Belen, but that's just basically a bridge route. There's not a whole lot of switching. And I had gone to a couple of operating sessions, and the operations bug bit. And I thought, man, I need to go home and tear my layout down. And I figured out real quick that the Hereford subdivision was absolutely perfect to model. You've got a lot of grain elevators, a lot of agricultural business, some meat packers, a lot of anhydrous ammonia going in, because that is a huge crop and beef raising region. So there was a lot of local switching back then in the 90s, and some grain elevators were still shipping a lot by rail, some of the smaller individual grain elevators, and you've got all of this great transcontinental traffic going between the two terminals, a lot of premium intermodal, a lot of double stacks, a lot of auto racks, a lot of general freight going from places like Chicago and Kansas City on the Santa Fe all the way out to anywhere from Belen to Phoenix to Barstow, LA, Southern Cal, Richmond, Fresno, Modesto, Northern Cal. So that was just basically the perfect area for me to model. I had a lot of the freight cars I needed, a lot of the grain cars. I had a lot of those. Of course, I had to buy and build more because once I started doing the grain traffic, that swallowed up a lot of cars, really fast. So I had to build up my a grain car fleet. But yeah, that's kind of the reason why I picked that time and place to focus on. And I modeled it on a double deck. The experts called it a Nolix design. There's no hidden helix. I use the around the room principle to gain and drop elevation. So it's basically, it looks like a double deck when you first look at it, but once you start following your trains around, like if you start at the bottom deck in Clovis and work your way up to Amarillo, it's not very long after you leave Clovis, you start gaining elevation slowly but surely. And it winds up being a double deck Nolix design. And I've got right at 230 feet of main line between the two terminals. So we've got quite a bit of switching and enough mainline run to make it feel like you're on that subdivision, because that was one of the shortest subdivisions on the Santa Fe at just over 100 miles. So I've selectively compressed it the best I can in 230 feet with return loops at each end. So it's a self-staging layout. So all of the bridge traffic, the transcon type traffic, I can run that twice in a session if I need to. I'll just assign a different train symbol to it for the dispatcher and the train crew. So it's, even though, yeah, you might have seen that train earlier in the session, it's got a different symbol. So it's worked out in my favor. That's all part of my operating plan that I've kind of revised and devised over the years, and I finally got it working pretty well like I need to.
So is it basically a dog bone with return loops on both ends?
Yes, it's basically two lollipops stuck sticks to stick, make in a roundabout way. Like I say, Amarillo has a return loop, Clovis has a return loop, but it's just a 230 feet between them, going around the room with two full-length peninsulas for both as well. So that's how I'm able to cram that much mainline run into a 2.5 car jumbo garage.
So it's all single track between the two balloons. Or the two return loops.
Yes.
Okay.
It's all single track with two very long passing sidings and a lot of industrial switching along the way.
What is the difference in height between the lowest part of layout and the highest part of layout?
The largest distance is 16 inches, and the pinch point is 12 inches.
What inspired this? I mean, I know you said you had a layout before, and then the operating bug bit you pretty hard.
It did.
And then you went into this, what sounds like a somewhat complex track design. What influences were you getting to even, head towards this kind of design?
The first time I went to a quote real operating session was at a club layout that was in the area. And I had met up with a few people. I was sort of a lone wolf guy. I had a small pack of friends that would hang out, and we would run trains at my place. But I'd always heard of this larger club layout over in Claremore. It's not too far from where I live. And I was at the hobby shop one Sunday, and I ran into one of the guys that was a mover and shaker in that club. And he said, "Hey, I heard you're building a layout where you live." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "You really ought to come out and run with us over at the CNS." And I said, "I've never been invited, but I'll take you up on that." So we exchanged information, and I got to go to the next operating session. And it was a very large club layout and a very large outbuilding. It took like 20 people to run it. So it's more than I could, do in my garage. But I literally went to that op session, and they invited me to the next one. And I went to the one next month. And on the way home that next month, I thought, I need to tear mine down and start over, because it was just a glorified bridge line. Had a really long yard. I could run 30 and 40 car trains, no problem, but it was just a single deck around the room with a very large J-shaped peninsula. And I thought, I can do better than this. And then I got to kicking around, and there had been a few layouts in the press that were double decked at the time. I forget exactly which ones they were, but I thought, I think I can figure something out how to make this work. I started thinking about stack staging, but then I thought, that violates one of the golden rules in layout design. You shouldn't put a yard on top of a yard, because I knew I was going to have a little bit of trouble shoehorning everything I wanted in my garage. My garage footprint is 25 by 25. So it's not huge, but it's not necessarily considered small either. But to run the stuff I like to run, I knew it was going to take a minimum of 30-inch radius curves. And then, of course, one of the design golden rules, you've got to have enough aisle space to make room for the people that are going to operate. And I was thinking the whole time, I thought, I should be able to run with 6 or 7 people in here. And I settled on 6 starting out for maybe the first 10 years. And it worked out really good, because the way I designed it, the main aisle that goes between the two peninsulas is at least 38 to 39 inches wide. So it's tight, but it's not constricting tight. But the other 2 aisles, they are tighter, but I designed it to where ideally there's only going to be 1 or 2 people working in those aisles at a time, because the switching area on top is stacked on top of a single track area with no switching on the bottom. So they shouldn't get in the way there. And on the other side, it's a yard stacked on top of a small switching area, so they don't get in the way there much. So I did take a lot of time and thought trying to minimize all these pitfalls the best I could. But invariably, some sessions, the way things always work themselves out, there is a little bit of crowding going on, but people don't seem to mind it as long as we're having fun. And my wife makes cookies too, so that anybody that gets too grouchy, I just throw a cookie at them. So
Cookies are very important. But Don, we've talked about this. It's like the best made plans, right? But then we've seen many of layouts do this. Everybody tries to make these plans of trying to keep everybody away from each other. And then all of a sudden there's just one
They're on
point where
top.
everybody's hanging out with each other shoulder to shoulder.
Well, yeah, I'm glad he brought up the aisle space, though, because that's something people never really consider when they're building a layout, especially if they're going to have operators there, you know. And it's so important. And usually they build their layout, and then once they have operations, and then they get all these people standing, they can't get by each other. And they realize, I think I should have maybe made it a little bit wider, made the scenery a little bit smaller. Instead of having 24-inch deep scenery, settle with 18 or 15-inch scenery, you know. And then as far as in my old layout, I had that problem. Now, my layout was 42 by 25, my first layout. And the way I designed it on the upper level, for some reason, I didn't design it to operate on both sides of it. It was on the inside. So after a few sessions, I went in the middle over there, and I see like 8 guys standing right next to me. I was like, wow. I said, this is not going to work.
It's almost like a moth to the flame.
Yeah. So I ripped the whole peninsula out, and I rebuilt the whole peninsula again. So the yards and the switching work was in the middle, and then all the mainline traffic was on the outside. And then after we started operating again, there was only 2 guys in the middle out of all them guys, and it worked out well. And I had the same thing with this layout. You know, I'm up to 5 operators, which is probably the max. And I've got, when I was designing it, I had my paper mill on a lower level, and then I had my Pawtucket switching area on the top. And I started looking, I'm like, how am I doing over here? I says, I can't do this because I'm going to have a guy working the yard, guy working a paper mill, a guy working up there. So I flopped the main line to the other side, and it worked out beautiful. Now, really, once everybody spreads out, they're just kind of in their own space, and they never really, the paper mill guy and the yard guy, the only 2 that are back to back with each other, and it's very, very manageable. But I'm glad you brought up the aisle space thing, because that's important when you're designing a layout, especially with operators.
The aisle space is very important. I've been to a lot of operating layouts, and the ones with large aisle spaces, man, you don't realize how nice that is. And then I come home, and it's like I see my 2 pinch points, and it's like, man, I wish I could have. The 2 things that I have regrets on my layout design are the 2 narrower aisles, and the fact that I have a swing gate duck under just to get in the into the room. But that's a necessary evil, and I worked around it and to make it work as good as I can. And it's, you know, it is what it is, sort of thing.
Yeah, right. Was there a reason why you opted to do what you did rather than put a helix in? Some guys just don't like helixes, but some guys don't use helixes because they don't have room, or they don't want to take up that kind of room.
That's exactly right. I didn't want. I'm not a huge fan of helixes because they can be an operational nightmare, and B, they take up way too much room. And I thought, if I can do an around the room climb with a gradual grade and keep it under maybe like 1.8%, where the trains don't have that much trouble climbing or going down, I'll have a chance to make this work out the way I wanted. And I just got lucky. When I had my the stringers up, I would kind of experiment with levels and putting pieces of plywood on top of the stringers just to see what it looked like. I mean, the first 3 months, I did a lot of screwing and unscrewing of lumber just to see what it looked like. It looked good on paper, but you both know how that looks.
I know.
When you start looking at it, and I've got a 3D mind, I can get an idea what it looks like once I've got it put together in front of me. And I had even gone to Hobby Lobby somewhere, and I bought a piece of light blue mat board to use as my backdrop. So I would lean that against the riser, and I would screw a stringer on the riser at a certain level and put a piece of wood on that, and then put one above that. And once I finally got to where I needed to get, all I had to figure out at that point was where the grades were going to be, how steep they needed to be, because I knew I wanted some level areas between the climbing points to have some switching, because you do your best to keep everything level, because nowadays with the metal wheels and decent track work, those cars will roll away from you. And I still have that trouble on some of them, but most of the switching areas on my layout are flat and level. So it's because you don't want to set your operators up for failure. You know, you do the best you can to make it as simple as you can, because I don't want people leaving when they come here saying, man, that was too much like work. I want it to be fun and a little bit more on the stress-free side.
Yeah, no, I understand that because I got a section of my sugar plant where the tracks go downgrade into the plant. And I thought I had it as flat as I could, but with the space I had, these new tank cars, they roll so freely that it's tough to keep them without moving. So throwing a plug at Macrail, we had they introduced this little it's a little hand brake. You put it right on the rail, and I mean, he sent me one, and it's perfect there. I mean, the guys have been using it for the last couple of weeks, and they said, "Wow, when'd you come up? How come you didn't bring this thing earlier?" You know.
Yep.
So some guys would find some weird ways to stop the cars from rolling back from where they were trying to switch them, but that thing worked out great.
I can't tell you how many times I've walked around the corner and saw the guys that run on one of my grain trains with a cut of 15 or 18 grain hoppers with the uncoupling stick stuck right down in the quarter roadbed, using that as a brake. I mean, that's you name it, and I've seen it.
I know, I hear you.
Well, my bench work was supposed to be completely flat, but compliments to Home Depot and their 1x-Pine.
Oh, Lord.
My bench actually has a roll to it. Didn't know any better at the time. That's what I built it out of, and now it's got a natural roll to it. I guess it's kind of the way the earth is too. But I got the same problem where cars roll in and out, and just trying to keep everything perfectly flat. And now I'm just digging into Homasote, trying to get everything kind of level again. So.
But back to the Helix thing. Now, I have Helix, so I mean, I only have a 20 by 12 shed. So for me to try to go all the way around the walls without having a really big grade was not going to happen for me. But my aisle space is 36 inches till you get to the Helix part, which is the end of the peninsula, and it shrinks it down to 24. But the front of it's 5 feet. So as long as, and I try to tell the guys, don't stand and with your back to the Helix. You got plenty of room on either side. So as long as that works out, we don't have any trouble. But I've always had Helixes, so I got to hold that against you. Don't worry.
No, that's okay.
No, but I mean, one of the great layouts that you and I both know, that was Tony Donatelli's Western Maryland, and that was a no-licks design too.
Right, yeah,
and, that worked out perfectly.
But he did have a Helix.
He did on the opposite side, but it was more of a service Helix more than it was a necessary thing. He could have run it without ever touching the Helix.
Yeah. Well, that was the rule.
But
he couldn't use the Helix during an op session.
Yeah,
that was one of the rules. So
right.
You can use it all you want when we leave, but while we were there, you couldn't touch it.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, Sam, let's talk about your operations now a little more.
Sure.
What you do, your dispatcher, train orders, signals.
One question at a time, Don.
I'm just bouncing them, stacking them.
Yeah, there you go. Stack them up. So go ahead, Sammy.
Yeah, I'll start off by saying that the dispatcher controls all the signals on the main line. It's CTC basically from yard to yard. A train will call up, like, for example, we go by a lineup. I've got a decent schedule that I've come up doing this all these years. And the first crew will get on the first train that leaves Amarillo, and they'll say, "Hey, I'm on this train," and they'll call in the train number, train symbol. They've got an information card they pick up off the fascia that's got everything, and they'll dial everything up and call the dispatcher, and he's got the copy of the lineup, so he's got a pretty good idea of what's getting ready to happen most of the session anyway. So he'll say, "Look for a signal," and as soon as you come out of the yard, there's a signal right there on the main line, and everybody just follows their signals. Dispatcher controls all of the turnouts on the main line. So it works pretty easy on the mainline trains. At the start of a session, starting in Amarillo, there are typically 6 mainline trains in the staging yard. Well, actually 7. The 7th one doesn't run all that often, though. And then there is an auxiliary yard on the other side that will originate a road switcher and the grain run. So I've got a total of 9 trains that can leave Amarillo going west. And then Clovis, it starts out only having 4 trains to go east. But then several of those trains that go west, when they get down to the bottom, they are westbound from Amarillo. But when they get to Clovis, the yard crew, one of their tasks are they turn the trains on there's a large balloon track on the bottom peninsula. So they go from being a westbound when they get to Clovis, but when they turn them, they turn into an eastbound. And a lot of those trains have work in the yard down at Clovis. So that is, it's not new, but it's the latest thing that I've added on the operation plan. That used to be just a glorified staging yard down there. But I had one of my local guys several years ago saying, you really need to add something down here to this yard, because invariably you get people come to your layout. They don't want to run on the main at all. They don't even want to do a road switch or a local. They just want to stay in a yard and only be responsible for about 10 to 15 feet of track. So I had to devise that. So I came up with that plan of all these trains that go from Amarillo down to Clovis, and most of them are intermodal, believe it or not. I do a lot of switching of intermodal trains. At the beginning of the session, one of the first trains setting waiting to come into Clovis is a westbound stack train. It's the SCHLA, Chicago to Los Angeles stack train. It's based on the real train that ran back there. And that train, once it turns, it becomes the SLACH, eastbound stack train, Los Angeles to Chicago. And it drops 3 cars right in the middle of the train. The yard's responsible for going through that train and finding the exact 3 cars, which I block them all 3 together. And they take those trains off of that car and they put in a pocket track. And eventually 2 or 3 more intermodal trains will come down there and do this exact same thing. And they'll have a originating train to originate out of Clovis. And while that's going on, all these mainline trains are running around. And if the yard gets behind, mainline trains do tend to stack up trying to get west into Clovis. But I circumvent that by having 2 of my crews leave out of Amarillo. The first one will take out a road switcher train that handles general freight. Like he switches a warehouse, small sugar mill at Hereford, the Budweiser plant, a couple of small grain elevators, and that is a turn. So that one never comes down to Clovis. That's a local road switcher turn that goes from Amarillo down to Bovina and back. He's sort of a thorn in the dispatcher's side. And then the schedule that I've devised to make the dispatcher even more mad at me, when he's halfway done, by that time, the grain peddler train leaves Amarillo, because I can't totally send all these trains down at Clovis, because they'll just totally ball up the yard within the first hour. So there's 2 trains that leave Amarillo. And the second one is the XAMAM. It's also a turn. It goes down. It basically does the same thing that the road switcher does, but it just works the grain elevators, the larger ones, handling cuts of 4 to 6 cars at each grain elevator. So it leaves town with 20 cars and comes back with 20 cars. And I've got a handwritten switch list. It's populated in Excel, but I just go through and handwrite the car numbers. And so they stay busy too. And that one usually takes a little bit longer than the first one does. I've seen that one take up to 2 hours, because all the while these guys are working, you've got mainline traffic coming by you, because there's two more guys that do nothing but run mainline trains to and from both terminals. And so I finally got it figured out. It took several years to come up with this, but I've got it balanced out to where it doesn't overload anybody too bad, and the traffic's able to keep moving. And the road switcher and the XAMAM1, they also do pretty good job of staying out of each other's way. But certain times when the run's running a little bit behind, I mean, the old adage in the airplane and the trucking industry, a late plane just gets later. It's the same with trains.
Yeah, really.
They tend to ball up on each other. Like Don said a while ago, you'll look and there won't be anybody in one aisle, but there'll be 4 people in the other aisle, because one's being held out of town because the road switchers got track and time on the main and siding, because they're doing a runaround move, because they're both turns. I tell the people at the beginning of the session, read your switch lists. Both road switchers that come out of Amarillo are turns, but invariably they'll get down there and think they're just going to truck right on into Clovis and they'll be done. But no, you're only halfway done when you're done with your switching work at Bovina. You got to run your power around your train, put it back together, and fight the current of traffic getting back to town. So it's pretty fun to watch happen. It's like a slow motion train wreck sometimes, but on the rare occasion I do have a pretty seasoned crew where everybody's been here several times. It runs like a top. We've had a few 4-hour sessions, but we usually run 3 to 3.5. But I have been known to call a crew for specific 4-hour sessions, and we ran 28 trains in one 4-hour session. So that's moving a lot of freight. and all three of the road switchers got ran, because if everything's running good, there's one of the trains that leaves Amarillo, he'll drop a cut of 16 cars in Clovis, and that becomes an eastbound road switcher train that does all the trailing points headed back that direction. That doesn't get ran all that often, but I've got it on the schedule just for special occasions when I know I've got a really seasoned crew coming in. So it's all of this was a lot of trial and error. I had an egg on my face trying to accomplish a few of these things, but when it works out good, man, it really works out good, and it's a lot of fun to just sit back and it's what's the old saying? Watching cows skate in a cornfield.
Now, do you operate?
That must be an Oklahoma saying, because I've never heard that up here in the Northeast. That's got to be
an Oklahoma thing. Watching cows skate in the cornfield.
Okay. Now, do you operate during your session? You just kind of walk around and
I mostly walk around and heckle people, to be honest with you.
So you're a superintendent then?
I'll do the occasional maintenance away, but most of the time I'll just sit back and watch, take pictures of people and heckle them. And when I see somebody doing something really harebrained, I'll say, well, "What are you doing?
Why are you doing it that way?"
Exactly.
See, that's why Don has to operate his, because that's what he would be doing
That's
going over there. Why are you doing it that way?
Yeah, I can't do it. I tried. I got to be a part of the thing. That's just the way I am. The other question I had is, we talked about the CTC. What do you use for a CTC system to control your signals and everything?
All of the electrical side is from the Digitrax format with the SE8C cards for signal drivers, and I've got optical detection on all the blocks, and then the JMRI CATs on the computer screen.
All right, that's what I use.
And then everybody that's on a train crew, they've got a throttle in one hand and a two-way radio on the other, and a switch list. And on the road switcher and the grain train, I run a 2-man crew. So that's very entertaining sometimes, especially when we do a crew draw and the two people that historically don't work well together get forced to work together. So some people have made even better friends, and some people have made even better enemies out of that deal.
Do you have a remote dispatcher, or is dispatcher's right in the same room?
The dispatcher's right in the other room, right on the other side. If he wants to, he can stand up and look out and see what's going on. And I've got a closed circuit camera that overlooks Amarillo Yard, because in addition to being the dispatcher, he's also the Amarillo Yard Master. Okay. He controls the switches going into and out of that yard on the main line, because I've got 6 mainline tracks that are through tracks, and then Junior Yard over there that the local and the grain switcher originate from. That holds about 50 cars right there, and then it's got a couple of locomotive tracks. So, of course, that's the upper level, so it's not really scenic on the backside of the backdrop. It's just very utilitarian. So the guys will get up there and put their train together, and as long as main one or the siding's open, they've got a running track coming out of Junior Yard to make the switching moves. Of course, that's dispatcher control, so they have to call him and ask him for a signal out on the main there. So that's I tell them, pay attention to that signal. If it's red, you cannot go past it, because the dispatcher's got control of that.
And he's in the next room. He knows where you live.
He is in the next room, and that's been fun a few times. I've had a few people that are, they think the red signals are just a suggestion. They say, "Oh, he's not watching. I'll just sneak past this," and he can see it on the screen. And the ones that pay really close attention, they'll kind of lean over in their chair where they can see out the door. And there's this one particular switch. If you pass the signal, it's another 1.5 feet, and you're on top of the turnout, and he'll throw the switch underneath you. And when you try to back
like
up,
a derail.
Yeah, it's
yeah. See, my dispatcher's remote, so he can't stand up and look in. He calls me. What's going on over there?
You're his eyes in the sky.
Yeah, right. But it's fun, And you mentioned MOW equipment that you run. So you do. That was another question I was gonna ask. Do you run MOW equipment and kind of mess with the dispatcher during an op session?
I don't usually. When I mentioned the MOW, that's me. Like if something's hanging up, I'll go do live maintenance away
Okay.
on it.
All right.
I've got a little toolkit I keep out with a couple of screwdrivers, needle nose pliers, X-Acto knives, the bare necessities.
Mhm.
So I keep that. So if something's going wrong, I'll try to fix it on the spot. But as far as your question about adding special trains to a session, of course and absolutely, I'm not above adding a special train onto the lineup just to see if everybody's paying attention. I had one of my good friends a couple of years back when the depressed center flat cars came out from, I believe it was, I forget, one of the manufacturers. He bought me one of those cars because I didn't have one on the layout, because he picks on me because I've run a bunch of these intermodal trains and double stacks. And he said, you need some of the slower stuff. So he bought this depressed center car. And of course, he sent me a load with it. So this is really cool and different. So I built that, and I got to thinking, back in the day, I would shoot things like that every once in a while. I thought, I need to put something like this on the layout. And of course, I've got a good friend. He's the owner and proprietor of Macrail. He is a high wide specialist. So I kind of picked his brain on a few things, and he sent me some ideas, and I came up with this diabolical operating plan to add this high wide special to one of my op sessions. And the guy that bought the car for me, I said, hey, you're going to run this train here a little bit, so I want you to be ready. So the instructions for this train, it's a 25 mile an hour max train, and it for all meets, it has to be stationary, because this big circular thing, I came up with this big crazy plan that it's going to go from Amarillo down to Clovis, and then Clovis, it takes off down the Carlsbad sub to where all those potash mines used to be. So I came up with this harebrained plan, and of course the dispatcher gets a copy of the train handling information, and when the crew calls in, he tells them, he said, I cannot exceed 20 mile an hour, and I'm a stationary meat train. So that thing takes about 30 minutes to get down to Clovis, fighting traffic all the way, and it's a lot of fun. And I don't run that every session, but I do try to throw things in like that, just to, you don't want people to get too comfortable.
I'm sitting here quite envious that you have the ability to do that flexibility. One day I'm going to have a layout where I can do that. And that sounds like a lot of fun, to be able to just throw in an extra train, throw in something different, just to shake it up just a little bit and not have your operating session the absolute same every time. That just sounds like an absolute blast.
I just started that center depressed car. Same thing. I got the Macrail boiler on there. So what we do is, I got a CSX yard, and I always wanted to add the fifth operator. So what I did is I put the center depressed car in the CSX yard at the tail end of the yard. So the crew is going to pull the car out, get in, he's going to put a train together. He has to bring the car over to Worcester, hands it over to them. They put their own power on it and a caboose and a buffer car, and then they take it up to Valley Falls and set it off on a siding up there. Because really, until the session gets going, the guy running the CSX yard really doesn't have much to do. So by the time he runs that job back, now he's ready to go in his yard. So it was just a little filler job, basically, but it worked out last couple of times. So it's always nice to add some extra stuff.
Yeah, you got to throw a curveball to keep the people on their toes. And, you mentioned maintenance away, and I gave you my spiel about fixing things on the fly and everything. But I did come by these, I think BLI made them for a very short time, these little maintenance away trucks. Have you guys seen those? The little bitty small ones?
Have you seen mine?
I have. Mine's even, it's crazy because I used to listen to the scanner, and I wrote all this stuff down on a piece of notebook paper. And when we've got a full crew, my oldest son, he usually likes to run with us when he can. But I said, hey, this is for guests. But halfway through the session, you come out and you ask for track and time. And if the dispatcher can, he'll give him track and time to do a track patrol. Mm-hmm. And everybody just kind of grinds to a halt while you see this little bitty small white maintenance away truck trucking down the track.
Yeah, those things are fun. I mean,
they're really cool. They're
yep.
Yeah, it adds the realism, like that, just that randomness, that kind of stuff, the track patrols or something randomly going wrong or an extra train or anything else. Again, just so when your operators show up, whether it be yours, Don, or yours, Sammy, that it's just something a little different. And I just, boy, I'm going to get that ops bug enough to where you did, Sammy, where I'm just going to go out and just rip everything out and start over again.
A lot of people have done that. But yeah, there's those little, little things that people never really consider when they're operating, especially because you have the same crew every week. They get used to everything they're doing. And then eventually, I don't know, to me, it kind of gets stale, So you got to kind of throw some stuff in here every now and then. Not all the time, but every now and then, just to kind of keep everybody on their toes and realize, oh, well, there's something different going. I got to pay a little bit more attention, but just those little things are fun to add.
Don, that is a perfect point. That is why a couple of years ago, I was operating about once every other month because frankly, it's quite a bit of work for me. I like to do things myself. So I was trying my best. I think I operated 12 times that year. I did several back-to-backs for groups coming in and out of town, but I thought, this is getting to the point where it's getting close to oversaturation for some people. And I don't want them to think of my layout as just a boring thing. So I cut way back on operating. I think the very next year I only operated maybe 6 times. So now I've got to the point this year I've been even less. I started doing a lot of custom painting work for people that had been bugging me for years to do things for them. So I thought, this year I'm just going to back off the operations. But I just had my 4th operating session for this year just a few weeks ago. And it's like, man, that was kind of fun. I'd like to do that more often. So it's the ebb and flow. But the fact that I kind of put a pause on having that many op sessions, you don't want people to get bored with doing the same thing. You try your best to change things up, but also having the same crew month after month, you got to really be careful on that because people will turn into, creatures of habit, muscle memory, doing the same thing. So yeah, doing those, putting some different trains on the lineup that do different things, running maintenance away, high wide specials. That is a really cool nuance of the hobby. And it throws a cog in the gears and it slows
it
down.
Do you let these guys, so do you make them rotate through all the jobs to keep them fresh? So they, or do you let guys run the same job continuously all the time?
I try not to do that, but I do have a couple of guys that when they come, they're so good at running the yard and they know the schedule. And you know how the yard is. If the yard doesn't run, the layout doesn't run. So It's very important that the yard at Clovis stays fluid because I have seen 2 or 3 trains waiting to get in the yard at once. And that it causes everything to be a diorama. And when it gets to that point, it's almost like the point of no return. It's going to take about 30 to 45 minutes to work itself out of that. And the guys have nothing to do but stand there and pick on the guys in the yard because they've gotten slammed. And most of the guys that I operate with were really good friends from around here. And there's a lot of heckling. So, everybody gets or gives a hard time and nobody really gets offended. So it can be a lot of fun, but it's in the same breath, you're sitting there watching this and thinking, man, this could have been a little bit better. How do I fix this for next time? But yeah, I try not to, if somebody wants to run the yard, I let them. But usually it's a key group of people that are yard guys. Everybody wants a shot at that XAM AM train because the best anybody's ever done it is like an hour and a half because it's a pretty involved job. You're and all you're doing is switching grain hoppers, but there's a certain way you've got to do it to where it will work. And you got to get back into town with your train all together. And that is a make or break train for the whole session. If it gets in the way and it's too late, it'll just cause everything to bog down, basically.
Yeah, that was on top of that you said about the. If you had a guy that wanted to do the yard, would you let him do the yard or train him or put him with a seasoned guy to help him learn to do the job?
It's exactly my formula. Yeah. Right. If I've got some guy that wants to do something new, I try to go out of my way to put him with somebody that's done it several times. That way that they can learn the right way or maybe the wrong way to do things as long as it gets done.
Everybody does things different. I don't tell my guys how to do the job. I'll make a suggestion.
Yep.
On maybe especially at the paper mill. So at the paper mill, which is pretty much the favorite job on my layout, is that you got to switch everything in the back before you start moving stuff in the front, because the stuff you're pulling out has to get shoved up on the track that's in the back. So, but a lot of guys, I tell them, do this, this, this. Then after that, you can do whatever you want. And some of them listen and some of them don't listen.
Don't.
So, then they I'm turning around and look, and the engine is totally on the wrong side of where all the cars are supposed to be going. So I'm like, okay, how'd you do that? You know what I mean? He could run around everything, but I seen one guy work himself into a corner one night, and he couldn't unwork it. He was so landlocked. He had cars all around him. He was all confused, and he was already in there for 3 hours. So normally it takes a seasoned guy would take. I got a guy who could probably do the whole yard in like an hour and 15 minutes, that whole switching thing in that paper mill. But then new guys struggle, which they will because they never done it before. But it's fun to watch people. Like I said, I don't try to tell people how to do it. Every crew has their own way of doing things. Even in the real world, no two crews do everything the same way. So
right. That's a fact, and it's all heavily based on the personnel you have at your place doing all this at once. I've had sessions where I've had operators that say they are good operators. I don't know them from Adam, so I have to trust that they know what to do. And in 3 hours, we'll run 12 trains. That's not running very much to me in my world. And then, like, for example, I was part of ProRail 2019. Okay, now those guys, that's the different level of guys. All the guys that do ProRail, they are layout owners. They are operators that travel around 2 or 3 or 4, 6 times a year. They are really good at what they do. I had 2 sessions, one of which was a crew of 9 people that had never been here. We still ran 19 or 20 trains with a boomer crew, but these guys knew what they were doing. These guys all read the instructions. They followed the instructions, and I couldn't believe how good it went. I mean, I was shocked. And then the next session on ProRail, I think I had 6 people that had never been here, but 2 people that had have, and they turned around and turned and burned and ran 22 trains in 3 or 4 hours.
Oh.
I mean, it was really impressive. And then you've got the people that say they can run, and like you say, they wind up painting themselves into a corner in 2.5 hours, and you kind of feel bad for them. But as long as you read my instructions on my switch lists and follow what you're doing on the switch list, it's sort of like playing checkers.
Right.
I've written everything out for you. There's click charts on the fascia for every switching location. All you've got to do is comprehend the first couple of moves. Then after that, it's all repetition.
I think we're going to have to pull that Don Irace drop of read the paper. And add in somewhere
read the
here.
paper.
Yeah,
it's right the there. It's like,
That's
what track do these cars go on? What's it say? Yeah. Track 3. Where's it go? Track 3.
The success you've had, though, also speaks well to the instructions that you write. And, sometimes that takes a little while to develop, but obviously, you're able to convey that information really well. Talk about your crew itself. I mean, how many guys do you have on your call board and, on a regular basis?
Ideally, the perfect session, I've got 2 2-person crews and 2 1-person crews. So you've got 6 right there. Then you've got a dispatcher, that's 7. You've got 2 people working in the yard down in Clovis, so that's 9. That for me is the perfect size crew. It works really good. I tried to experiment by adding 1 more. That's sort of, critical mass. It works good for a little bit, but if one thing goes wrong, it just causes the snowball effect. So I try to keep it down to 9. 10's fun for a little bit until it's not, So that's how I break my guys down to start the session, and start with those 2-man guys or 2-man crews running the XAM AM1 will leave, and then it's called the RTEX road switcher. It follows him right out of Amarillo. So those guys are both 2-person crews because it's a lot to handle. One guy just carries the radio and the switch list and the uncoupling pick, and the engineer basically just carries the throttle and listens in and tries to pay attention to everything that's going on and switch cars without, breaking anything or getting in the way.
And your yards, when your trains are done at the end of the night and they're where they're supposed to be, do you switch cars, take cars off the layout, put new cars on the layout, or you just use the same rotation of cars?
On all the mainline trains, they pretty much stay together. About once every other year, I'll alter the consists just to make them look a little bit different. I alter my locomotive consists quite a bit. In fact, probably too much, to be honest with you. But you don't want things to be stagnant, so I
Right,
try to change
exactly.
the locomotive consists. But as far as fiddling cars on and off a layout, very rarely. Once I get a good balance, I try to keep everything on. I do have extras if I need extras, and I'll swap out a car here and there. But like, for example, the XAMAM1 grain train, it's got about 80 cars on the layout right now. There's enough for 3 full trains, plus some extras that stay landlocked at the grain elevators. Basically, they're not really landlocked, but they're there, and they're not supposed to be picked up. So I use those as the telltale to see if the crews are paying attention, because some guys will just pull a whole track full of cars, and you're not, there might be 7 cars on that track, but the switch list says you're only supposed to pull 6. And they're in one solid block. I don't fool around trying to make, pull the first 4 out, leave the next 2 and pull the next 3. Because I know the real world does that, but I try to focus on making things easy. Like, for example, running things in blocks. Now the road switcher, he does handle individual cars. You've got to be on your toe to pay attention to that. But the grain train, I try to run it in blocks of 3 to 4 to 5 cars a piece. Like I say, he's taking 20 cars out of the yard, and he's switching a lot out there, doing customer service moves from the storage tracks to the loading track. Then he'll pull the loads and put in his train to take them back to town with him. So it's 20 cars out, 20 cars in, but it's a lot more work to get to that.
So do you have like cycles, like this week, say you work 3 weeks in a row, do you have like 3 different cycles of switch lists that you use, or do you use just one and just do the same thing every time?
That's exactly what I've got. I've got 3 cycles of switch list. I use Excel switch lists because I work in Excel all day, every day. So
Same thing.
It's easy for me just to do an Excel switch list, and I can change it on the fly. All I've got to do is make a quick change and reprint it, and it's a double-sided switch list. Your soup and your instructions are on the front of the page, and then your picks are on the back of the page. It tells you exactly where your cars are at, the cars that come back. It tells you the cars that stays. It's not prototypical, but I found out that it's easy. People can follow it pretty easy. As I tell them at the beginning of the session, as long as you follow the instructions on that switch list, you should make this happen pretty easy.
Right.
I'm not saying it's not a challenge, because it is, because you're contending with, the traffic around you and the people around you. But most of the guys don't have too much of an issue. And I've had a lot of guys tell me that this was very stress-free, but it worked, and it felt prototypical in the same way. And with a mix of mainline trains that are getting in my way, I couldn't get it done as quick as I wanted to, but that's prototypical because I'm always having to wait on a more important train. So it's just like the real railroad was back then.
Well, you mentioned prototypical, and I'm curious. You've set the era to the summer of 1995. Your op scheme, would you call it more prototypical or more freelance?
Well, that's a good question, actually. I was fortunate enough to get a copy of the Santa Fe Transportation Service Plan effective January 1st, 1995 from my good buddy Dave Appadizano. I don't know how he came down with this thing, but he called me one day and he said, "Hey, I've got something for you. I'm going to drop it in the mail to you." And I thought, "Oh, hey, this is great." And when it came, it's like, holy cow, it's got way more information than a model railroader would ever need. But when I got that is what made me finally put 2 people working in the yard in Clovis, because I finally had an idea to run these blocks and these intermodal trains. Because, I mean, not everybody switches intermodal cars in HO scale, because it's most people, when you think of an intermodal train, it's an A to B train. but a lot of mine do a lot of switching, and it gives the two people enough to stay busy for 3.5, 4 hours if they need to stay busy that long. But gleaning information from the prototype, learning how certain trains were blocked, and the TSP not only had the intermodal schedules and the blocks and everything, it also had a lot of the manifest traffic, how it was blocked. So I re-engineered one of the manifest trains to follow that a little bit closer. I've, for lack of better term, I've enhanced it for, what do they say, the play factor, to make it more model railroad friendly. That way, it kind of fits my layout better, and it gives a crew another train to run. You drop like that. I think I talked a little bit about it earlier. The westbound train, it comes down to Clovis, turns into an eastbound, and drops 16 of its cars that are pre-blocked, and that becomes the eastbound local out of Clovis. And then the 6 grain hoppers at the head of that train, they go back into the yard, and the yard crew goes and fishes 14 cars out of a grain elevator, and that's another outbound train out of the yard right there. And I gleaned that by looking at that TSP that Dave sent me, the way those blocks were scheduled to work. And my Clovis is just like the Santa Fe's Clovis back in the day. It's a major intermodal block swap location, but they did have enough manifest traffic in there just to keep things really busy. And they had plenty of switch crews working 24/7. Make sure all these trains did what they were supposed to do. And of course, I don't have that room or the luxury to have that many people working, but I did put a lot of thought into how Clovis worked and how it made the rest of the layout work better.
It's an impressive operation for sure.
Absolutely.
A lot of people call it nerding out. You know, the railroad's already done everything for you. All you've got to do is, for lack of better terms, I hope I don't offend anybody, but you dumb it down a little bit to make it fit your layout. And like I say, add to the play factor a little bit to give guys more things to do. It's glorified busy work, but face it, when somebody comes to your layout, they don't want to be standing there with nothing to do for much more than 10 or 15 minutes at a time. They want to run at their own pace, usually, I've found. But most of the guys, when they come to my layout, they know they're going to get to run quite a bit. And believe it or not, I've actually had guys that normally like to work road switchers and yards. They say, I want to run on the main this time. I want to see how many trains I can run. And I've had a few guys run 6 or 7 trains in 6 hours. It's that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're waiting for other trains, and sometimes you got to wait to get out of or into a yard. Anytime you go to a layout on a 3-hour session and run 6 or 7 round trips on a layout like that, I think it's pretty impressive. It involves staying marked up quite a bit. One of the guys that did it called it turning and burning, and he did it. And of course, Samuel was out there, my oldest son, and he ran mainline trains, and he ran 6 or 7 the next session too, because as soon as he tied up on a train, he'd say available crew at Amarillo, and the dispatcher, he just goes down his lineup and says, okay, the next train is 199, the lead motor is 250, and he picks his card off and gets his address plugged in, and he said, okay, I'm ready to pull, and the dispatcher gave him a green signal, and away he goes, just like the real ones did.
It's always important to have a good dispatcher too that can keep trains moving, because without a good dispatcher, you can get in trouble real fast.
Yeah, one more level of nerding out. The Clovis sub back in the 90s, I've actually talked to several of the crews that ran that back then, and their goal was to get to 70 mile an hour as quick as they could once they left Amarillo. And if they were on a really, really hot train that they knew they were going to get green signals, they tried to average 64 mile an hour better the whole trip. And that involves getting up to speed and slowing down for the permanent speed restrictions. So it really was a glorified racetrack. And there was a permanent speed restriction when you come around the curve, right when you cross the state line at Texaco. It's when you go from Texas to New Mexico. There's a 35 mile an hour speed restriction right there. But then it's 10.2 miles from straight track to the depot tracks at Clovis. Those guys would try to get their train up to 70 so they could, quote, grandstand coming into the terminal. That would be highly frowned upon nowadays. But back then, I actually saw that happen several times when I was on my rail fanning trips. And then going back east, when you'd come out of Clovis, you try to get up to 70 as quick as you could. Then you slow down for that speed restriction going around the curve. And as soon as your head end power would cross the highway crossing, they would just slam that thing into run 8, and the Fred would cross that highway crossing running 60, 65 mile an hour. And the highway paralleled it right through there, like really close. You could throw a rock at the train and hit it. And those guys would hammer them. It was really impressive. So if you chase the right train to where they know they're going to get a good run, they would pin those ears back. And there's a lot of times you wouldn't be able to catch them because the highway has a couple of speed restrictions that the railroad does not. And to not be able to catch a mile long piggyback train is pretty impressive. It's a really neat stretch of railroad.
Well, we mentioned at the top of the show, you and I had talked nearly to the day 2 years ago, and you mentioned about your passion for photography and obviously model railroader, but you didn't mention author. And then I picked up the recent copy of Designing and Operating Yards by Dave Abelies, and pleasantly surprised to see on page 62 an article by Sammy Carlile. Why don't you tell us a little bit about writing that?
Now, hang on just a second here. I haven't even gotten my copy yet, Ray.
There it is.
I've got it on order. I've got it on order. It just hasn't delivered yet, so I'm waiting.
Boy.
So don't spill the beans too much. I was approached by Dave. I've worked with him on a couple of projects over the years, and yes, I have submitted things to publications, and I've been in Craftsman and Railroader and a couple of the others of the smaller publications, and he asked me if I'd consider doing a piece for that. I didn't know I was going to have my own little article, to be honest with you. I just wrote a few things and submitted some photographs. So it'll be a surprise to me when I get it.
There you go. Well, I won't give away too much, but definitely check that out. Again, this is the Model Railroader Layout and Design and Planning Series, Designing and Operating Yards by Dave Abelies. And you can pick that up. We'll provide a link along with other links, including some photos as well, all on our website. You can check that out at aroundthelayout.com/131. Sammy, what an awesome time learning more about your Hereford sub. Don, we got to get to Tulsa and go check this out.
No kidding. We got to get to a lot of places.
Yeah. Well, this is one on the top, very top of the list to definitely check out Sammy's layout and get our hands on the throttle and see how many trains that we can get running in that period of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys come down here and spend a weekend, and we'll do all sorts of fun stuff. I'll shove some barbecue in your face along the way too, if you don't mind.
You didn't even have to sweeten the deal, yet you did, and there it is. I think you got a winner there. So, Sammy, thank you so much for coming by and sharing your story.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks a lot for having me. I hope I didn't get too long-winded and ramble on too much, but it's a lot of fun, and I like to see the railroad come alive, and it's a sense of pride for a layout owner to see all the work and the time and effort he's put into when things actually do run good.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's episode, check out past shows, and much more on our website, aroundthelayout.com. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at aroundthelayout.com/crew. Follow us on social media, aroundthelayout.com/social. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.